Well, what's going on, animators? Aaron here. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us for episode 3 of our CGRiff animation podcast. And you're all in for a treat because we have none other than Ben Willis in the house tonight. Ben has had a long and storied career over at DreamWorks Animation. He's currently head of character animation, Hoka, on Trolls 3, out later this year. And we're going to get into all of that later on. And we're just excited to have you stop by, Ben, and hear about your story, your journey this far, and inspire some of our viewers. So thank you. And let's get right into it. So let's start at the top, man. You and I have known each other for a long time. Obviously, we went to SCAD together, class of
yeah, we won't talk about it.
Yeah, we're back a long time ago. But start us at the beginning. How did you find your way into this career path? You know, did you always want to do animation? What's your kind of story and journey been like so far? Just give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of how that all came about.
Yeah. Well, when I was born no, you said Cliff Notes, right. No, I think for me, honestly, a lot of it, started when I was when my mom used to take me to like museums to like go and I'd bring my sketch pad and that sort of thing, but I never really thought of myself too much as like an artist, per se, and my path kind of continued a more like sort of traditional, liberal arts kind of route until I went to high school, and I remember this is the story that I tell. I remember my guidance counselor, gave me this list of like possible majors that I could do, and I just looked down the list, and I was like, there was art. It was alphabetical, so it was like art, and I was like, maybe. And then I was like business. I was like, no, not really. And then like chemistry, and I would kind of like go down the list, and the only thing I said maybe to was art. And I'm like, do you have anything for art? With that, it kind of surprised me because I again, it wasn't like I saw myself as like an artist per se. I mean, I don't know what it means to be or feel like an artist exactly, but she gave me this big pamphlet for SCAD. It was like SCAD, as you know, is like great at marketing. So they have this whole like beautiful laminated booklet, and I looked through it and I was like, oh, this looks really cool. They got so many different things you can do, and around that time, I think Toy Story had come out, and Jurassic Park had come out, and there were a few different things, and I did like working on my computer, and my dad had purchased way back in the day of something called Ray Dream Studio. I don't know if anyone remembers that. There's Ray Dream Studio. There was 3D Studio Max, which I had to get. Maybe I had to get a cracked version of it, but I played around with it a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I kind of like something with computers and with art. That's all I really kind of knew, and I was fortunate enough to have my parents, because I hadn't taken many art courses before. They were like, sure, we can try art school. SCAD seemed to be like the coolest one that I had gone to visit, and I remember, you might remember, there's like a tour of the school where it would go by the Gen Library, and at the time, on the second floor of the Gen Library, it was a normal library, but up on the top, there were a few classrooms that had computers in it. And I remember I was there, part of a tour, and I kind of snuck like a side part of the tour, and I peeked in to see like what was happening in this dark room, and there was just one student sitting there like tumbling this like humanoid character in like a T-pose. I don't know. When I saw that, I was like, that looks really freaking cool. I was like, can I just do that? Like, so I ended up going to SCAD, like you said, and I was a computer art major. So at the time, I think at SCAD now they've split it up into like 4 or 5 different majors where there's an actual animation track, and then there's like broadcast, and then there's game design and that sort of thing. So they have separate disciplines. But I think when we were going there, it was just computer art. It was like this, or they were just starting to design
split while we were there. Yeah. When we started, it was computer art. Yeah.
I don't know if you stayed on the computer art track, but I did. I was like, I did all these credits, and I didn't want to lose, other credits, but. I started down that path, and there was an intro to Maya class with, I think it was Kurt Whitty, I think was my teacher.
Yeah, Kurt,
And our final project was, you could model a city, you could model a boat, you could model a human, and all this other kind of stuff. But one of the things was you could model a Looney Tunes character or something like that. And I was like, well, that sounds kind of fun. And so I did Tasmanian Devil, and then for the last part of the project, it was like, okay, if you built the city, do a flyby through it or surface it and that sort of thing. But if you did a character, try rigging it and then have it do like a jump and a walk or something like that. I don't necessarily find myself to be like that romantic of a person. You know, I usually am pretty practical with things, and I'm like, yeah, I want to do this, so I'm going to do this. But that night when I was in Montgomery Hall, and it's like 3 a.m., right? You've got your like half-eaten McDonald's next to you, and you're in the lab, and it's just the hum, and everybody else, all the other students are in there. And I was sitting there, and I was animating Taz. I even downloaded like a free rig online. I didn't even like really rig it myself. I got like a free auto rigger and like set it up, and still had to skin weight it though, which I hate. To this day, I can't stand skin weighting. I animated Taz dancing to Billie Jean from Michael Jackson, and I don't know what to say other than I fell in love with animation right there. I was kind of like, I don't know if there are too many other moments in my life where I was like, you know what, I think I could do this for the rest of my life. And, kind of fell in love with it there, and then, pursued future projects, at SCAD. I was part of like a group project, which was fun. I did my final project, which was great. And, when I got out of school, I had applied to all the major studios and either didn't hear back or got rejection letters from all the major studios. But there was an alumni from Charlex in New York City, a commercial company in New York City, and they were working on a short film called One Rat Short. And what enticed me about it was that it was in the Northeast. That's where I grew up, so it was like near family, but also it was keyframe. And a lot of the other job opportunities I was kind of getting was like at Midway Games and at some other places that did a lot of motion capture, and that would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with motion capture. It's just I wanted to get into feature. I knew that's what I wanted to do, so I was like, I just want to try at least to see if I can get there. And the short film was keyframe, so I was like, all right, yeah, that's at least I'm still doing keyframe and I'm still doing like character animation, so yeah, let's do that. And that was I learned a lot of that experience. I think there are a lot of things I think that went well, and there are some things that I feel like I would do differently about that experience. But it did get me in touch with some really good people, and I got to get paid to animate, which was insane to think that like someone would pay me to do this thing that I actually like to do. And I met someone there who was from DreamWorks, or who had worked at DreamWorks previously, and he's like, hey, I heard about this outreach program, which is kind of just for kids just out of school, or like a year or less out of school. And I really like your work, and if you're interested in DreamWorks, like I can recommend you to my friend, and you can send your reel over. And so I did that, and DreamWorks gave me a call, and I did a video conference call. Like nowadays, it's so funny. Everybody's got like video conferencing where you can do it on your iPhone. But in that day, I had to drive down to. I lived in New Hampshire. I had to drive down to Boston, and I had to go to like a FedEx Kinko's place that had a specially designated room just for video conferencing. That I got to. I had to schedule time for, and I got into it, and I interviewed with some DreamWorks legends. There was Jason Reisig and Fabio Lignini and Dan Wagner, some of the old guard. I mean that with all due respect, the old guard. They're amazing legends, of animation, at least at DreamWorks. And I got to interview with them, and it worked out. And so DreamWorks gave me a call, and the outreach program, just to let you know, like the outreach program was essentially like, they signed you to like a 4-year contract, which is kind of crazy to think about it now.
It's like a baseball player.
But yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah. Thinking back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, I should have asked for like, signing bonus or some. Anyway, no. But they signed me to a 4-year contract, and for the first 6 months, I got to work on production shots. Granted, they weren't the most glamorous shots, but that makes sense. I'm brand new, to the industry. They gave me some shots, but I didn't have quota. Essentially, like I wasn't stuck to a specific expectation, because it's part of it was to like have an apprentice or a mentor, kind of like an apprentice program. So like one of my supervisors, Alessandro Carloni, who directed Kung Fu Panda 3, amazing artist. He kind of took me under his wing, and he was my supervisor, and he kind of like helped me, and Dan Wagner as well, who was head of animation, that they really helped me grow and learn, and what was great about it as well is you get paid like a full, like, granted it's a union minimum, but I was still getting paid as an animator. It wasn't like an internship sort of thing. It was like, no, you are an animator, you are And yeah, and then it all seemed to work out. They liked the work that I did, and as you said, I've been there ever since. So it's been about 16 and a half, almost 17 years. Probably when we finish
Yeah.
Trolls this year, it'll be 17 years. So
That's
yeah.
yeah, that's incredible. Not a lot of people have that kind of longevity at the same studio, which I think is significant. And just for our viewers out
Yeah.
there, as timeline reference, your first show there was the first Kung Fu Panda, right? Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was
Yeah.
back when.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, it's so funny. I still it still feels somewhat fresh to me, but then I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was actually a good bit ago. And some people tell me they're like, oh, I love that as a kid, and I was like, oh my god,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I
you
worked
know,
with the internship this year, and like some of the kids covered through. Yeah, they like the stuff they saw basically in diapers. It was like the stuff we saw in
yes,
college.
yes,
Yeah, it was like okay, all right,
yeah,
to make us feel really old. But
um,
awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
so that's great. So can talk us through, I guess, once you came in on the first Kung Fu Panda, you're in this I guess kind of training program basically.
yeah,
That's super cool that you guys are in the union down there, of course. So you have minimums and these things
yes,
because it's very
yeah,
different in
yeah.
other parts of the country. But so that's your first show, and then what was kind of your progression through that? I mean, obviously now you're in leadership. That came about probably much later on. But what was kind of your if you I'm not gonna make you name all the shows if you probably don't even
No,
remember them
no.
all at this point. But what was kind of your progression since then? Like since you've been there?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very, very, like you said, I'm very blessed to stay at a place for a long period of time, because like you said, that doesn't happen very often. And I actually really, honestly, when I started to work at DreamWorks, I was like, I feel like I hit the jackpot right off the bat. It's such a great place to work. They're really great people. They really work on a good work-life balance, and you get to work on such awesome projects. So I feel like I mean, you can always like pick out things about anything, to be like, well, maybe this could be better, or maybe I'd like a little bit more of this, you know what I mean? But I've always felt at DreamWorks that I was just very, very, very lucky. So my progression, yeah, I started on Kung Fu Panda, and I was an animator on that. I helped a little bit with Madagascar 2. I did do a little bit of cycles on Madagascar 2, and then I think I might have helped with like a shot or two potentially. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. I only say that because my brain, I'm losing my brain more than that's the thing it says most about me, is I'm losing my mind a little bit. But the my progression from there, I was an animator for a good bit. I had the opportunity to work as not really an official lead on characters, but like I got to work on. I was one of the go-to people for like Poe for certain shots and for certain things, and like on Rise of the Guardians, I was part of this thing called the Jack team, which was like a select group of people who were primarily focused on the character. I mean, everybody animated Jack, but we were people who were a little bit more specialized with the character. We had character teams for all the other characters pretty much in the film, like Santa and everything. But so I kind of worked my way up that way. Like I was animating and just trying to do the best that I could, and you're really focusing on the craft. Just trying to be the best animator that you could and make better acting choices. And thankfully, I had a few supervisors that really believed in me and believed in my skill and my talent, and really tried to hone it as I was working on certain films. So one of my supervisors, Dave Pate, he really on I think it was on Kung Fu Panda 2. It was either Shrek 4 or it was Panda 2 that we had worked together, where he was like, it was great. He was just blunt and he was honest. He's like, you know what? He's like, you do good work. He goes, however, I don't feel like your characters are thinking, not truly. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that they're missing some thought to that, like feeling like that the clocks are working inside. And then he had a few other things, and he's like, why don't we work on that? Like the shots I might give you might not be glamorous, but we're gonna focus on these areas where I think you could be better. You know what I mean? You could improve and that sort of thing. And so I've worked very closely with him, like in terms of shooting reference and picking out the reference, and talking about spacing and posing and facial expressions and all that kind of stuff. And it was almost like it was maybe I don't want to say it, but like 4 or 5 years into my time at DreamWorks, where like it felt like I was kind of going to school again. You know what I mean? Like he was sort of like someone who was taking a special interest to like help me improve, because he felt like I could, he felt like I had the eye to see it, and and from then it really changed my workflow. Again, I continued to work on films, and really the moment where things changed for me was the first Trolls film, where it's always so funny when movies are in pre-production. Sometimes you think you know what's going to be the hot film or what's going to be like the one that everybody's going to love, but it's not always that clear. Like, so for instance, Kung Fu Panda back in the day, the first one, everybody kind of looked at it as like, nah, nobody really wants to work on Kung Fu Panda. We thought the title was weird, and they were like, Kung Fu Panda, like that, I don't know. And then like Jack Black's attached to it, but like, okay, sure. But they were like, they thought B movie was going to be and now B movie has its own following, you know what I mean, and its own. But they thought because Seinfeld was attached to that, they're like, that's the one that you got to be on, you know what I mean. Whereas Kung Fu Panda, they're like, nobody was really like paying too much attention to it. So when I got put onto it, I mean, I thought it looked awesome because obviously I'm right out of school and I'm like, oh my God, everything looks awesome, you know? But even thinking about like Trolls and that sort of thing, like early on Trolls, I think people were kind of skeptical of it. Trolls had gone through a bunch of different iterations, so it had gone through a bunch of different things. So I don't think people really knew quite what it was going to be. And so I think therefore we're maybe a little bit skeptical of it, but I remember talking to, I think Jamal Bradley. Yeah. Jamal, I remember, I think he sat me down one time and I was feeling frustrated because I wanted to continue to grow. Like I wanted to continue to push myself and find new opportunities like in leadership and that sort of thing. And Jamal sat me down and he goes, it's like nobody seems to really be expecting too much from Trolls right now. He goes, it's right, you're right on the ground floor. He's like, if you put in the work or showed the interest on the ground floor here, like, it might be a really good opportunity, for you and for the film to like do something surprising because nobody's expecting it. You know what I mean? Like nobody's expecting. So, so he kind of gently, friendly, pushed me to go like, why don't you, go see what you can do. And, so quickly I went over to David Burgess, who was the head of animation on it. And I was like, hey, I think I'd like to do a test for this. And he's like, yeah, sure. And gave me a test, and I got to do this dance test with the Trolls, and I had so much fun doing it. And I showed it to people, showed it to David, and I showed it to a bunch of other animators, and they were just loving it, and they were loving the energy that was brought to it, and it was a different way of seeing the style of Trolls than they had seen before, and so they're like, Ben, why don't you come on and help us do early dev, like rig rec some characters, let's do some development tests and that sort of thing. And we had a small crew, maybe of like 4 of us. Like, so there was the head of animation, I think Anthony Gray, who was a supervisor. There was me and maybe one other person. And so I really got in on the ground floor, and I got to like build libraries and do character dev tests and all that stuff that's part of pre-production that I wouldn't normally have gotten to do. And then halfway through Trolls, I got promoted to supervisor. So like partway through, so it was interesting because I didn't start the show off that way. So
Yeah.
that was an interesting way. Like on Friday I was an animator, but then on Monday I was a supervisor. So like even my cube mate, and we're really good friends, Jacob Gardner, he's such a good guy. But it was even strange to be like, just Friday I was just animating, you know what I mean? But then come Monday, it's potential now you're on my sequence and I'm now, supervising and
a little bit.
yeah. And I mean, everybody was super great and everybody was super supportive, and it was a little bit of like a trial by fire sort of thing where they kind of just throw you into the role, and you just have to kind of figure it out. And so, you try some things, in certain meetings, you're like, do I speak up now? Do I not speak up? What am I supposed to talk about? And you know what I mean? Like certain meetings you've never been in before. But yeah, it worked out great. And then I was just so fortunate that after that, they just, were cool with me supervising on other films. So like I pretty much moved right over to like I helped finish up Boss Baby as their last supervisor on that, which was a lot of fun because Carlos and Ronnie and that whole team, and they're like amazing artists. And Tom McGrath is a very particular, precise director, but he's really good at what he does. So it was really cool to work for someone, because some directors, like the directors I'm working with on Trolls, they're a little bit more relaxed. Like they obviously have something that they want to see in the shot, but they're not as like picky about certain things. But Tom would like, very specifically give you shapes and that sort of thing. And so it was cool to work with a person, who was more detailed like that. But I'm sorry, this is probably a long-winded story, but essentially, I continued to supervise. I was lucky enough to do that. I eventually supervised on Trolls World Tour, which was great. I got to get on really early on that with Carlos, who was the head of animation on it. And what was nice about that is it was everything that I had learned on Trolls, I could then take with me over to Trolls World Tour and go, here's how I think we can do it better. You know what I mean? Like, here's how we can try to make the characters more appealing. Here's, things like acting choices that I thought worked. Here's a way of setting up the library that I thought was successful, that I thought we could do better, so I could take a lot of that stuff that I had learned, over. And then after that, I supervised on Mr. Wolf from Bad Guys, which was felt like such a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity, not only for the style, but for JP, who was the head of animation on it, to get to work with him, who's a good friend of mine, and Pierre, who was the director, who's another good friend of mine, because we started ish around the same time as animators. And he's just a incredible artist. To get a chance to work so closely with them with such a cool character who's like a main character on a film. And just before we finished on Bad Guys, I was told that, we were making Trolls 3. And I was contacted by Walt, Tim, and Gina, who are the directors and producers of Trolls, and they had worked on the previous Trolls film, so obviously we had worked together before, and they made me the offer to be head of animation on it. So I left Bad Guys just like maybe a month or two before it fully wrapped in animation, and that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half, 2 years or so.
So for our viewers who may not be as familiar, I do want to double back to Bad Guys. That's one of my son's favorites. He just watched it this morning.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely going to get into that because I love that huge sequence you did at the beginning. But while we're talking about it, can you kind of explain what the role of Hoka is basically on a show, and how that kind of differs from supervisor for everyone who's not maybe as familiar with the different titles?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because it's true. Every studio is, I think, kind of different. They do it slightly differently. I think you could probably tell me, what Pixar is like. I always got the impression that Pixar, there was more just like you had a supervisor, or you had a group of supervisors that kind of overlooked everything. Is that right?
So I think what you guys call a Hoka, we call a supervising animator. So we have one or two per show, and that they're at the very top. And then we have like leads under that they call directing animators at Pixar, at least.
Gotcha.
And there's usually like 2 or 3 of them per show, and then everybody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that sounds sort of similar to us, just I guess different titles.
Yeah.
But yeah, so essentially, if we were to go through like a hierarchy, you have your animators, and then depending upon the show, we will have leads, which are usually animators who are credited as leads, and usually what their job is to take on kind of extra tasks, whether it's usually development tasks, or to help build libraries, or to do development tests and that sort of stuff in addition to animating shots. So they're still animators, but they have kind of these extra development tasks that are usually added on to their list. And for the supervisors, for supervisors, they usually we have about 5, depending upon how big the film gets, we have like 5 or 6 of them. And again, that depends on the film, what the role of the supervisor is. For Dragons, for instance, supervisors were more like character leads. So they would be more in charge of a character, doing dev tasks, building the library, and then whenever we'd have reviews, they would chime in specifically to about the character. So like they would help the head of animation and the director give specific notes to those characters. The way we're doing it on Trolls, and this is the way we do it on some other shows as well, is that my supervisors are more like sequence leads, in the sense that, as we have sequences come through the film, they'll have a team of animators that'll be on that sequence, and what they'll do is they'll kind of shepherd the sequence and shepherd the team of animators, giving them feedback, and helping direct them on the shots, and follow the director's vision. And then after the animators have checked in with them, then they'll check in with me. So the head of animation is kind of the person in charge of the overall style and the look and the functioning of that particular animation department on that film. So, Hokas will sometimes animate as well. Like supervisors, you typically animate as well. So everybody's kind of animating to a certain degree. But definitely as you go up the ladder, you're animating less and less, and obviously supervising more and more and going to more meetings. So I'm not as hands-on with animation anymore, although I still try to have a few shots up, and that I can still feel like I'm doing something. and so I guide, and organize and help manage, that whole thing.
And so you sort of mentioned it before, but I know they kind of do it different ways at different studios. But
Yeah.
once you've kind of moved into like a supervising role or like a Hoka role, do you tend to kind of stay there, or do you ever bounce back and just get to like animate on shots, or are you kind of like now
Yeah.
more like on the management side a little bit?
It's, it depends on the opportunity, and it depends on like what the person wants to do. So yeah, so sometimes we'll have, a lot of times typically Hokas will kind of stay in that role, and we'll go on to different films. But again, we always try to cast the right person for the film, right? Um, you know, I'm sure there are definitely certain films that I don't think I would have been as good of a fit for Puss in Boots, but like Ludo, who was the head of animation on that, was like perfect. You know what I mean? Like he was like the perfect person for it. He was also promoted to be head of animation on Puss in Boots. So, we still try to find the right person for the role. And usually we try to pick from the crop of Hokas, I think, first, but we always do interviews. So just in case there is someone, usually, I don't know if I've ever seen an animator go to a Hoka. Usually you need to have that supervisory experience,
Yeah.
before you go up. But I've seen Hokas also kind of say like, I don't really want to Hoka on the next film. I'd really love to just animate. You know what I mean? So that's possible, but also sometimes Hokas will then come down and supervise as well. But it just depends on the project, and depends on what the person wants to do, and if the fit's right. But yeah, we kind of, for the most part, supervisors will kind of stay in this supervising, sort of role, and Hokas will kind of stay there. But there is still a lot of shuffling around, which I think is good. You know what I mean? I don't think I don't think you always want the same voices or the same perspectives on things all the time. You know what I mean? So I know we've been trying very hard to work on more diversity and inclusion, because there's so many different stories to tell, and there's so many different characters that, like, for instance, myself, right? I was the lead on Poppy on Trolls 2, and I mean, I'm okay. I'm an okay animator, but like, there's only so much that I can. There's only so much that I can understand from like a certain female perspective, and that sort of thing. And not that it has to be a female that has to animate female characters, and males can only animate male characters, But I feel like I was missing a certain perspective, and so on Trolls 3, one of my supervisors, Brooke, who's just an amazing talent. She's risen up pretty quickly. She was actually someone who came through our trainee program, and not too long ago, and now she's supervising, because she's just a stellar artist, and she's kind of lending her voice to Poppy. Like she's more the lead on Poppy now. And what's great is that Poppy doesn't feel like a totally different Poppy, but it feels like she's evolving. You know what I mean? And she's got some deeper aspects to her that honestly, like, I just don't think I would have even known to include. You know what I mean? So it's just great to have more voices and different voices, especially within leadership. And I think that's something that we're trying hard to do. And so that's why I think it's good that we, change things up if we can. You know what I mean? As long as it's the right person for the role,
That's awesome. So one thing I wanted to ask, because I've sort of noticed, I guess something that's kind of interesting or unique to DreamWorks is you guys tend to run with fairly small animation teams for each show. Like when you watch the credits, compared to like Sony, I was, our last episode with Zach. Yeah. He said on CBeast they hit like 180 something animators on that show, which is like our whole department plus some. What is that like, or kind of what's the reasoning behind that, or is that just like are you guys working on so many projects at once that you just kind of keep smaller teams, or what's sort of is there like philosophy behind running kind of lean and mean like that?
Yeah, I think that is kind of exactly that. I think is exactly our philosophy, where we like to have smaller crews go for longer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, obviously you have to get all that footage done, but you have to stretch it somewhere. So it's like we try to get crews on a little bit earlier. And have them go just for the longer length of the show, because, I mean, it's multiple fold. Because one, I think, the more people become familiar with characters and a style of a film, the more efficient they become. You know what I mean? So like it's good from an efficiency standpoint. Also, it's great from like an ownership standpoint. We can give animators large chunks of shots, in the sense that you get this like that's how we cast a lot of times. Like there's a beat here, and we want you to handle this beat instead of just the shot that that's in there. Now, obviously, towards the end of things, towards the end of shows, things always happen, right? Where sometimes you don't have that luxury anymore, and you're like, okay, I'm giving you this one shot, and I'm giving you this one, and you try to do the best you can to try to get it done. But also part of it is that I think I could be wrong. I don't know this empirically, but I feel like DreamWorks on average has been, of the major studios like Disney and when Blue Sky was around, but of Pixar and that we typically have like a little bit of higher quota expectations. Like we're just a little bit higher. Like I've initially when I started we were around like 5 feet a week, but now we're kind of like 6.5, 7 or so. And I've talked to some other people at Disney and at Pixar. It feels like there's a little bit less stress on trying to hit those higher numbers, or it doesn't sound like the expectation is quite the same. So I think that's one way that they do it too. They're kind of like, okay, it's a smaller crew, but maybe you go just a little bit faster. But again, hopefully if you have them on for longer, they're more efficient anyway, so you can start to hit those numbers.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of, I think what DreamWorks has always tried to do, and it's something that we try to maintain if we can, because I think it works pretty well for us,
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you guys have done so. I mean, you've been there long enough, obviously, to touch so many shows, but there's such a variety of like a range of styles of shows and things. I feel like, especially even now, they're pushing boundaries with how things look with Puss in Boots, Last Wish, and with Bad Guys and some of these things, and even some of the earlier stuff, Home and Boss Baby, and some of these things just look and feel so different from each other from show to show. What is it like, kind of hopping from one style to another like that? And is that something you enjoy in terms of like getting to flex, I guess, different muscles in terms of naturalism versus something that's way more cartoony or something like that, or do you find that kind of a fun challenge, or is that kind of a pain?
Yeah, it's it's a little bit of, it's kind of a little bit of both. It's what I mean. I think it's good because it keeps me on my toes. You know what I mean? Like I can't get too comfortable. But you're right. It is also fun. Like I think, for instance, Guardians, which was much more of like a natural show. That was awesome to kind of go through that process and learn how to animate a little bit more naturally. And to learn a little bit more about how actual anatomy works, and how much can we reflect of that in the animation? Like we still want to push some things so it still feels animated, but watching Guardians, it feels pretty naturalistic, and Dragons is also pretty, somewhat naturalistic. It is, I think, more pushed, than Guardians, that sort of thing. But what the funny thing is for me is that I've worked on, Kung Fu Panda and worked on Trolls and Boss Baby. I never found that it's natural for me to do more cartoony, for lack of a better term, cartoony animation. It's just not natural. It's not comfortable for me. But it's interesting now that I look back on it. I'm like, I've actually been on a number of those shows, and now I'm like head of animation on one of those types of shows, and it is something that I both enjoy for the variety, but also, like you said, it just kind of keeps you learning. It keeps you challenged, because even though I am a Hoka on this role, and I arguably in some ways should be the maybe the most capable or the most knowledgeable, I find that my team is able to bring stuff that I just would have never thought of, or they continue to push the boundaries way beyond what I could have thought. So now I feel like I understand much more in this Hoka role. It's less like I need to dictate what they need to do, and more like I just need to help foster what they do best. You know what I mean? Like help them to do what they do best, so that they can bring these crazy ideas and awesome things, because they're doing a better job than I would if I was animating those scenes. So it's like being in this role is a new challenge in that particular way. You know what I mean? It's like I'm less directly affecting the things and more just helping to kind of guide and steer and support.
So do you do is part of your role the actual casting of shots, like you're selecting that this person is going to do this set of shots or whatever? Is that a big part of the role?
I do it with my supervisors. So since my supervisors are sequence supervisors, what I usually do is I have them cast first. Like they'll do a first pass of the casting. Okay. Usually they'll like reach out. I don't know how it is at like Pixar, but like they'll reach out to the animators and be like, hey, are there any shots you're interested in this sequence that we got coming up? And usually the animators will be like, oh, I like this or I like that. And so they'll kind of work out the casting, also trying to think to the people's strengths. And also, like, if someone's brand new, maybe we don't throw them in the deep end quite yet. We give them something that's a little bit simpler, or vice versa. And I think then they come and they check with me and they'd be like, hey, Ben, what do you think of this casting? Maybe we'll have a little bit of back and forth, kind of going like, I wonder about this. Maybe we should swap this or whatever. But for the most part, my supervisors they're usually pretty dead on, so I'm just there to double check and make sure that I feel good about it too. And also part of my job and the supervisor's job as well, but I have a little bit more bandwidth to do it, is I usually meet with animators at the beginning of the show and ask them is there anything you want to grow on in this show? Are there certain types of shots that you never get that you'd like to try, or, that kind of thing? Or are there certain characters that you really like, or moments that you like in the film? And usually I try to build a list or a Google Doc of that. And so that's something that I'll look out for as well. So like, as we're looking through casting, I was like, oh, well, this person we've given a bunch of technical stuff and they really wanted some acting. So how about we swap them with this person and we'll give them a little bit more, or like in a big, even broader sense, where it's like, we've got this really nice dance sequence coming up. And I know this animator said they really wanted to they were such a big fan of like Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or whatever. And I was like, okay, can we take them out of this sequence and swap them over there and put some, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of like that puzzle moving around, but I try my best to cater to what the animators are excited about, you know what I mean, or what they're interested in doing.
I feel like you always get people's best work that way when they're excited about it, for sure. And so to that point, from at least from the outside, it seems that, I mean, especially in your case, DreamWorks has really good retention, and I suspect that type of conscious effort to help people grow and cast them on the types of things that are going to push them in that way is maybe a part of that. I don't know if that's been your experience. It's like, if people feel like they're being heard or they're being challenged and getting the types of opportunities that they're interested in, those types of people, I feel like tend to stick around for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And our culture at DreamWorks is a very supportive culture. Like the animation team that we have, there's always going to be an egos to a certain degree, but really we do a pretty good job of I think, just trying to come together and help each other, and whether it's knowledge about software or being another pair of eyes on their shots and that sort of thing. I think we foster this kind of like tight knit group, like we all go to lunch together. Like we have lunch on campus, you know what I mean? But all the animators try to go to lunch together. So it's not just that we work together on the movie, but we also like to hang out with each other and we like to chat. So I think we build that kind of community. And also at DreamWorks, it very much is a community like campus. Like the campus is, I don't know if you've ever been on DreamWorks campus, but it's almost like a theme park in there. And so it's easy to feel like we're this tiny town, so I think that lends to it a lot as well, where people, I think feel comfortable in a good way, to stay.
Yeah, I came and had lunch with Frank Abney several years ago when I think I was down for CTN, and I love UL's campus. It's just once you come in the gate, you feel like you're in this old like Tuscan village or whatever. the water feature going and all that. It's really really nice. Cool. So I wanted to sort of back up a little bit. I know you're very much in a supervisory role at this point, or kind of leading the show. But as an animator, when back spending time on the box, what types of shots? And you touched on it a little bit. What types of shots, I guess, you gravitate most towards, or are there like certain types of shots that still kind of like scare you the most, or at this point can you kind of just handle everything, or are there still things that you sort of gravitate more towards? Like, some people are like, they love acting, but the more physical stuff they kind of shy away from or whatever. Are you kind of at this point, I assume, very well rounded, but are there things that still kind of speak to you most?
If you ask my wife, she said I've never done a bad shot, but that's if you ask her. I feel like, kind of like I was saying earlier, I feel like I struggle most with really cartoony, really pushed ideas. I do tend to be a little bit more like natural, and I tend to like, kind of like what we did on Dragons or what we did on Rise of the Guardians and that sort of thing. And a lot of times, like, I'm going to try to my best to like update my reel, but like if I put my reel together and you looked at it, you could see there's a lot of shots that I did that were kind of like that. Usually just like waist up, sort of just emotional sort of beats. Not that I can't do, action stuff, but I just don't feel like it's my strongest. I still struggle with it. I a lot of times, I feel like I can see it in my head what it is that I want to do, but especially with like action stuff, sometimes I can't quite get the spacing just right, or you can't just quite get the weight just right, the way you want it. There's this animator by the name of Cameron Fielding, who's I think at Valve, or at least last I heard he was up at Valve. I remember when he came, he had this like, I think demo, I think this was him. I think he had a demo reel before. We had done some animation on Turok. It was
the dinosaur thing. I know what you're
dinosaur,
talking about.
Yeah. And I think he had come up with this reel where he's like this guy's like tackling these dinosaurs and doing all this physicality where the dinosaurs are like kicking and doing this. And I'm like, oh my God, like when you watch something and you're like, I don't know how you did it. Like, I don't know, most of the time it feels like you can frame by frame through something and be like, oh, okay. And then you can kind of figure it out, but with Cameron, and then he did some really great stuff on How to Train Your Dragon that just had this like physicality that I just didn't make sense to me. Like why does that work so well and that sort of thing. And I just find that stuff, that's usually the stuff that I struggle with. Like the thing that I struggle with the most is actually, it's simple, but like if you have an arm and you just drop the arm and you let the weight of the arm, like the arm has its own swing and then it takes your shoulder with it and that sort of thing. And like arms are like the hardest thing for me to animate. I don't know why that is, or simple motions like just the weight thing. That has just always been, I think I'm just always going to struggle with it. I think I've just accepted, that there're just certain things, I think it's just going to be difficult for me.
The trolls have very short little arms.
Yes, stubby arms. So I was like, I don't even have to, I do it pretty simply, and then I run sim, and then dial that down, and then there you go. You got a little bit of, I think I've just accepted that there are certain things like that. I definitely don't feel like I've got it all figured out. I think part of the reason why I wanted to get into leadership, it definitely wasn't because I figured out animation out. I think for me it was just I wanted a different type of challenge. You know what I mean? Like animation, yeah. I'm always going to learn. I'm always going to learn new things, and I'm always going to improve, at it. And I think for me it was more like, all right, like what kind of challenge would it be to like develop a character or come up with shapes for a character, or what kind of challenge would it be to like lead a team? You know what I mean? To cast somebody something and try to, see animation from like use my animation knowledge. You know what I mean? To then help me. Guide a process or have a little bit more, say in certain parts of the process. So I think, I think animation is just certain things are just, it's always, I think animation is just always going to be hard. I think even if you were to ask like James Baxter or Glenn or anybody, Glenn will be the first to tell you that, for every like 100 drawings he does, maybe one's good. You know what I mean? Sort of thing. Even though we would look at the notebook and be like, actually all of them are wonderful, but I just think I think that's just the way animation is. I think it's
keeps you humble. Yeah, it never.
Yeah,
it's always a new challenge.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's back up a little bit to Bad Guys. Like I say, it's one of my son's favorite films right now. It's in the heavy rotation.
So glad
it's on several times a week in my house. Tell us about, I saw on some other podcast or whatever, you were talking about the opening sequence. You basically did, what is it, like 90 seconds or like 2 minutes or something of this opening sequence.
2.5 minutes.
You did Wolf, right? And then I guess someone else did Snake. Tell us what was that process like? Did you ask for that, I guess, beat in that, or was that just part of being the supervisor on Wolf, or how did that come about? And what was it like sharing a shot that long? And is that kind of common to share? You take one character, I take another character. Obviously, in something that long, it makes sense. But just kind of run us through that process.
Yeah. I think in regards to like multiple animators working on a shot, it's not super often, but it does happen. Especially when when we have a case where there's a slightly longer shot or there's a lot of complex stuff happening. And again, depending upon the deadline, if we got to get something out quicker, we'll do it. But it's not an ideal situation. I don't know if you've animated on a shot with multiple people, but it's the process of like, well, who animates first, and then but to back up, just even for the conception of the shot and that sort of thing, it was early on in the film when we were doing development that a storyboard artist, I think it was Mike Surrey actually, who had storyboarded the scene. There was this early idea, right? We're going to do this like kind of Pulp Fiction-y sort of opening, and just a really long shot that we want to have to open up the film, just sit with the characters and kind of do it. There was a lot of back and forth because obviously, Pierre and even the producers and that sort of thing, they're always kind of going like, do we really need a shot that long? It will be technically challenging, sure, and blah, blah, blah. Like, is this how we want to start the film and how we want to introduce the characters? Anyway, JP, the head of animation, he had come to me and he was kind of like, so there's a possibility that we might have this super long shot at the beginning of the film. And he goes, it's kind of a unique opportunity because obviously you don't usually have shots that are that long, and also the context of the shot, just two characters kind of hanging out and talking to each other. Like, to me, that's like an animator's dream, like just two characters hanging out and talking, and relating to each other. I'm like, who gets that kind of opportunity? So I was like, this would be a really unique opportunity. And obviously leading Wolf, I was like, I wanted so badly to do something impactful with Wolf. Like I wanted to have at least a couple of shots, that I felt like could really help set the tone for Wolf, because I think that's an important part of leadership, is not just, helping to lead your team and that sort of thing, but also setting an example can really be helpful too. You know what I mean? Like if you can show maybe how something can be done that maybe other people can, use that to guide some of their animation. So JP had told me about it, and I'm like, all right, I would love to do that. He's like, just know that if you do this shot, that means you're not going to be able to animate a whole bunch of other things. You know what I mean? On the film, right? Because it's 2.5 minutes. It's like normally when people finish a film, I don't know how long it is normally for people at Pixar, but like when you finish a film, you maybe have 2 minutes, or maybe a tiny bit more of the entire film. So this already, I was like, is this all I'm going to do for the film? Thankfully, I had a few other shots that I was able to do, but it did mean I had to sacrifice not going on to other sequences that I really wanted to. I mean, I'd still supervise them, but I couldn't animate on them. And we had a lot of back and forth. We almost didn't do the sequence. They almost cut it out of the film, and then they decided, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And so I had a lot of meetings with Pierre and JP to go over the lines of dialogue that were in the shot. Like we did a lot of pre-planning to go like, is this what we want to do? Like, is this laid out? Because once I start animating this, it's going to be very hard to make big changes, to it and that sort of thing. So like, let's make sure the dialogue is the way we want it. The takes are the right takes that we want. And then essentially Min Hong, who is the lead on Snake, he animated Snake. And so Min and I, were in all those discussions talking to each other about what is it that we wanted to do and the beats that we would have. And I remember I went and I got into the shot before Min did, and so I just shot reference for the whole chunk. I was like, I'm just going to go shoot reference, and I'm going to get the acting beats, and then I sent that over to Min, and I was like, what do you think? And he had some thoughts and that sort of thing, and then he shot reference, and we kind of like matched up the reference, and then we showed that to the directors to kind of be like, this is what we're thinking. What do you? The Pierre had some great little notes, but for the most part, at least on my side, most of the reference that I showed, he was like, yeah, I think it looks great. Maybe move this up a little bit closer and maybe add a little moment of thought in here, but otherwise good to go. Like do that. So basically, because I was a supervisor and I needed to focus, I only had so much time to animate this shot. They kind of cleared my calendar, and I would still have to go to certain meetings because obviously I was still the lead on Wolf, so I needed to chime in on some stuff. But I basically had a few months where I could just sit down, animate, go through it, and when I first tried to open up the shot, it wouldn't even open up because it's
too heavy or big.
It's so massive that so many frames that Primo was like I didn't know what to do, so I had to work to like cut down what assets were in the scene, and then I had to work with a TD to do some extra scripts to get it open, and finally got it open, and we had done so much pre-planning that I had a really good idea of what we were going to do and how it was going to go. And so since I was the first one in it, I laid out everything from start to finish. And then Min started a little bit later. Like after I finished blocking, I think then he started so he could automatically see what I was doing. So he was kind of like reacting to some of it. And obviously I was leaving space for him to do the parts that he said he was going to do. And it was great to do the back and forth. I mean, thankfully there isn't much contact between Wolf and Snake. You know what I mean? There is a little bit of choreography where they got to like walk around.
He just like
But
passes him the sugar at one point, and then
yes,
and then
yes,
the
yeah,
walkout stuff. Yeah.
exactly. So I had to do like that's a for instance like I had to do that first. I had to kind of like and again they don't touch the bottle at the same time, which is great. So he's like he places it on the table, he lets
Oh,
go,
that's
and
right.
then
Yeah.
Snake grabs
Okay.
it. But there are certain moments where they're walking through the diner where one crosses in front of the other, and we do that sort of thing. Min came up with a great idea. Like originally, when they leave the diner, I had Wolf opening up the door for him and going like, after you sort of thing. And but Min came up with this great idea where they both put their backs to the
Yeah.
door and then
Back
they
out.
half share a moment and then they both head back out. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I did have to adjust that part a little bit, um, and then the only other technical challenge was that so there's a bus that goes right in front of the screen for a second, and there technically is a cut there, and that was for like
It's like a
technical
wipe.
reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a quick wipe. Yeah, yeah. And it was for two reasons. It was to get them across the road just a little bit more. So like it wiped and like I just needed to cheat them across the road a little bit more. And then also for technical reasons because CFX, who does all the cloth and hair and that sort of thing, it really helped their simulations if we could just cut at a certain point. There's also a cheat where when they cross the road, if you notice, there's a really long distance that they have to travel to the bank. To
Oh, yeah. The camera goes up.
It goes up and then it comes back down. Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
So like if you saw you're like walking and then the camera goes up and it goes like and we cheated all the way over and then the
Oh,
camera
nice.
came back down and you put them right in the
Smart.
front. So because otherwise it was just going to be like how long it would take them to walk across this whole thing. So yeah, there was a lot of choreography, a lot of back and forth, but thankfully there wasn't a lot of adjustments with the camera. There weren't any real big redos because we had talked about it so much and we had planned so much
So on a
and
sequence like that, how many of the ideas are there in boards? Like how tightly is stuff boarded at DreamWorks in terms of like a lot of the ideas being there, or was it kind of a little more of an open slate in terms of coming up with
yeah,
kind of the beats and the moments?
I think there were a good number of beats in the sense that there's certain moments like when Wolf does this moment where he goes like air and he kind of like looks up. I think Mike Surrey had drawn a drawing like that, and there may be a few other moments that were picked out of the boards, but I think the majority of it was stuff that Min and I had come up with or that we had talked with the directors about. Like for instance, sharing the sugar. That was something we came up with, afterwards because we had these discussions about a big part of the point of the shot was to show the relationship between Wolf and Snake, show that they'd known each other for a while and that they're friends. And so what we wanted to do was like, is there any way we can show that Wolf can anticipate Snake's needs? You know what I mean? So it's like Snake doesn't even ask for the sugar, but he just automatically reaches over and gives it to him because he knows that he wants it. And the fact that they kind of razz each other and get little smiles on after they like razz each other just to show that they're actually kind of joking, with each other. And then little stuff like there's a part where Wolf, looks out the window and he's like, let's get out of here sort of thing. Little details like that or things that we just added later because now that we have the environment,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if he just looks out to indicate that they're going somewhere or to make the environment feel more than just the set that they're in. I don't think, there is some stuff from layout that we got. We had a couple of discussions with, I got to meet with Sam Rockwell a couple of times, which was really great. And he had the idea of Wolf like leaning up over the counter, when he's like, can I get a check, please? Sort of thing. He had come up with a few ideas about Wolf's swagger and how he walks and some other little things. And, well, as you know, it's just a mix of inspiration from anywhere. And you just hope that you're like, you grab the good ones, the good ideas, So yeah, some of it from storyboards, you're like, yes, I love that idea. Yes, I love what layout did there,
Yeah, it turned out awesome. I love all the little texture, like like you say, you kind of led by example and really set the tone for who Wolf is in that scene. The little like tugging on his jacket and stuff that he does, and it really kind of establishes the character in a really fun way. And you don't see those types of scenes that often where two characters just sitting there talking. I think of that one, and then like Mr. Incredible and Frozone in the car in the first film and stuff.
Right.
Those types of moments that they, for whatever reason, they don't find their way into animated films as often as I think they should. But no, kudos to you on that. Yeah, because it's a super fun sequence, and that whole movie is just a lot of fun. So yeah, bravo to you all on that one. Really excited to see what you have queued up for Trolls 3, because I know myself as a parent of a young kid now. I know in the early pandemic days, Trolls 2 was like wait gangbusters on streaming, and like got a lot of
Yeah.
people through those early days of the pandemic just running that on loop for their kids.
Right.
So, so I think people will be excited for the third one for sure. So I just want to transition as we kind of come towards the close of our time. Just
Yes. Yeah.
in terms of more like kind of philosophically or whatever, what are some of the things maybe for the in terms of inspiring our viewers? What are some of the things that you had a pretty direct path to feature animation basically from SCAD.
Yeah.
But what are some of the things that you wish you had kind of learned earlier in your career or sooner? If you could go back and tell your kind of starting out on Kung Fu Panda self, what are some of the lessons that maybe took you longer to learn than you wish they had, or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Yeah, I have I've had a very very lucky path. I know some people that have much more interesting stories about how they got to where they are now. I'm not complaining, but I think for me, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give students nowadays is to just make yourself as lucky as possible. And I know. And basically, what I mean by that is, it's acknowledging that luck is a very big part, of not just pursuing this career, but life in general, right? There's, you could do everything right and it still not work out. You know what I mean? Like you could do everything you're supposed to do, and life still, the roll goes the wrong way, sort of thing. And so getting into Pixar, getting into DreamWorks, getting into, any of these different places, or even just getting a job as an animator, to a certain degree is somewhat out of your control, but in the meantime, work on your craft. You know what I mean? Like just continue to I know like Jamal talks about it, and I think Frank even talks about it, like talking about the grind and that sort of thing. And I don't want to be too much of like too work forward in the sense that like you just need to work as hard as you can and you need to sacrifice everything to not, because no, I think you absolutely need to have a balance in your life. I think you need to, and not everything is animation and not everything is about work, but I think just learning to love the process as much as possible. You know what I mean? Like learning to just love creating for the sake of creating the thing. Like you want to see something come to life, so you get better at creating that illusion of life, right? You get better at making more appealing poses, or poses that read clear and that sort of thing. And that's what I mean about making yourself as lucky as possible, because the more you work on these things and you create and that sort of thing, you're just going to get better. You know what I mean? You're going to get better, like the more you do this stuff, and you're going to build up a bigger portfolio of stuff and meeting, talking to people online, or reaching out to people, that are in the industry, or just building up a rapport and becoming part of the community and that sort of thing. Like, when we went to SCAD, I was just, at the time, I guess I wouldn't think about it at the time that I was like, these are the people that I'm going to be going into the industry with. But like at the time, I'm just kind of like, isn't this cool? We're all doing animation. We're all figuring this out together. But building those friendships and working through stuff together, and everybody building each other up and trying to improve, now you can see where we are, where it's like, you have these friends in the industry, and you have these people that know you and that sort of thing, and know your work ethic and the type of person that you are, that will just increase, your odds of getting lucky, you know what I mean? Of something, happening, someday. And, there's so many other things I'm sure I could mention that are specific to like animation, that I wish I knew at that time. But I think for me, and maybe it's because of my privileged position, you know what I mean, of the type of family I grew up in, and the resources that I had and that sort of thing, that it's easy for me to say. But I was like, but loving your craft and loving it, what it is that you do, and falling in love with the process of it, will, to me, that will lead you to where you want to go. You know what I mean? Like don't worry about the stuff that you can't control. Just be ready when your number's called. I always like I'm from New England, so I'm a Patriots fan, much to many people's like chagrin, and I'm a fan of Tom Brady, although I think he is a strange fella, to a certain degree. But I think what I loved about his story was that he just worked hard. You know, he just kept working at it, try to get better and improve, and he loved the game. And when Drew Bledsoe got hit and got knocked out of the game, just completely by chance, you know what I mean? Brady's number was called, and he did his thing. You know, he was ready for it. He was ready to go. You know, when his number was called, he was ready to go, and then he never gave the spot back up. And, you know, obviously the rest is history, but that's kind of the way I think about it. Just get yourself as lucky as possible so that when your number is called, you're not going to let it go. It's going to, you know, so.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great.
Yeah.
So in closing, man, we're coming to the end of our time here. I just have kind of a final question, sort of, as you know, any other closing thoughts you care to offer. But what's next for Ben, right? What do you have? You know, you've been at DreamWorks a really long time. Do you have other career aspirations in terms? You know, do you plan on directing one day or any of these other types of things? Are you pretty comfortable where you're at in kind of a leadership role, or what do you kind of? What still excites you about the industry in terms of opportunities, or what you might see yourself doing? You know, 10, 15 years from now, even.
That's a good question, Aaron. I feel like I love the challenge of being a head of animation. You know, I love the even though I'm in a ton of meetings, more meetings than I would like to be in. I do like the challenge of scheduling things and working with, like, it gives me part of what I really love about the job is it gives me a chance to meet so many different people and have relationships with all these people, you know, that maybe I wouldn't normally have if I was just animating, you know, for instance. And so I like that. And so I think I would like to direct one day, although I don't know if that's going to necessarily happen anytime soon. I'm very envious of, you know, Frank and others that have been able to like pursue that path. I think that's something that I'd like to do. So who knows? I think for right now, I you know, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I think I want to get better at it, you know, before I, you know, move on. You know, I feel like there's still a lot that I have to learn in this position, and I've realized as well that I still like to create. So, you know, being a head of animation has kind of taken me a little bit away from the actual creation, like the hands-on creation part. So at the moment, I'm a little bit weary of getting too far from the actual hands-on, you know, creative part of it. But
sure.
But who knows? We'll see. I'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll be waiting and watching. And again, super proud of you and your career path thus far. You know, honored to know you and have been a peer for so long. It's been exciting to watch, and can't thank you enough for taking some time tonight to swing by and talk to us. So from all of us at CGRiff, thank you for that. And yeah, we're really excited to see Trolls drop this fall. Trolls 3 will be there to see it. And yeah, man, just best wishes and best of luck to you and all of your endeavors as you continue forward. And thank you. So we'll go ahead and cut it here, and we'll see you all next time.